In the remote mountains of Uruzgan Province, Afghanistan, a U.S. Navy SEAL witnessed something that would shake everything he thought he knew about modern warfare. What he saw that night during a joint operation would remain classified for nearly a decade. But when the stories finally started emerging, the world learned the truth about what the Ozzie SAS really accomplished in the shadows. Today, you're going to hear what American Special Forces operators, Navy SEALs, Delta Force, Green Berets, actually said about fighting alongside their Australian counterparts. And I'm warning you, this isn't the heroic war movie you're expecting. By the end of this video, you'll understand why a senior Pentagon official once stated, "If I could take only one foreign unit into the worst fight imaginable, I'd take the Australians without hesitation." Stay until the end, because what happened during Operation Slipper and what came after will change how you understand elite warfare forever. Let's rewind to 2001. September 11th changes the world overnight. Within weeks, the most elite military units on the planet are deploying to Afghanistan. The Americans send their best: SEAL Team 6, Delta Force, Army Rangers, Green Berets. The British deploy the legendary SAS and Special Boat Service. In Australia, they send the Special Air Service Regiment, the SASR. Now here's what most people don't realize. The Australian SASR isn't just another Special Forces unit. Among military professionals, they're considered one of the few global units that U.S. Joint Special Operations Command treats as a direct operational peer, alongside Britain's SAS and Canada's Joint Task Force 2. These are the units that American Tier 1 operators trust to operate at the exact same level as Delta Force or SEAL Team 6. What does peer status mean? It means seamless integration into the most sensitive missions. It means real-time intelligence sharing. It means when American Special Operations commanders plan the most dangerous raids, SASR operators aren't support. They're equals at the planning table. But here's where the story gets fascinating. For nearly 2 years after the invasion, the Australian SAS conducted operations almost entirely in silence. No embedded journalists, no press releases, no glory, just mission after mission in some of the most hostile terrain on Earth. And the only witnesses? The American operators fighting right beside them. In 2014, Navy SEAL Marcus Luttrell, the lone survivor himself, was asked during an interview, "Who are the toughest warriors you've encountered in your career?" His response was immediate: the Australians. Those SAS guys. I like to see a Taliban fighter go one-on-one against one of those Aussie operators. It wouldn't even be close. This is Marcus Luttrell, a man who survived a 4-hour firefight against overwhelming Taliban forces. A man who crawled 7 miles with a broken back, shrapnel wounds, and a gunshot wound. A warrior who's seen humanity at its absolute worst. And he's saying the Aussies operate on a different level. But Luttrell wasn't alone in his assessment. Across veteran forums, military podcasts, and private conversations, a pattern emerged. U.S. Special Operations veterans kept telling the same kinds of stories. One Delta Force operator, speaking anonymously in a veteran podcast, described a joint operation in Uruzgan Province. High-value Taliban commander. For Coalition Special Forces units coordinated the raid. American SEALs, British Special Boat Service, Canadian JDF-2, and the Aussie SASR. He said, "We had a solid plan. Cordon the compound, night insertion, methodical breach. But when our helicopters arrived at the target, the Australians were already on the ground. They'd fast-roped in under complete darkness, secured the target, neutralized security, and were preparing extraction before we even touched down." The operator continued, "What we planned for 3 hours, they executed in under 15 minutes. Not recklessly, not sloppily, with surgical precision." That's when I understood, these guys don't wait for the perfect moment. They create it. Okay, those are compelling stories. But let's look at the documented record, because this is where anecdotes meet evidence. Between 2001 and 2014, Australian Defence Force records and field reports estimate the SASR conducted well over 3,000 combat missions in Afghanistan. 3,000. That's second only to American Special Operations Forces among all coalition partners, and Australia's military is a fraction of the size. Field analysts examining operational reports estimate the SASR maintained casualty ratios that far exceeded coalition force averages. While precise figures remain classified, Pentagon assessments noted their operational efficiency redefined expectations for small unit effectiveness in counterinsurgency environments. But here's a specific battle that U.S. Army Rangers witnessed firsthand. September 2nd, 2010, the Battle of Uruzgan. A combined Australian-American-Afghan force was ambushed by an estimated 100 to 200 Taliban fighters in a coordinated attack. The SASR operators, outnumbered and caught in a kill zone, didn't retreat. They held their ground for hours in brutal, close-quarters combat. When the dust settled, the Taliban had suffered catastrophic casualties. The Australians? Minimal losses despite overwhelming enemy fire. A U.S. Army Ranger positioned nearby later said in an interview, "We could hear the intensity from our position. It sounded like the world was ending. We prepared for casualty evacuation, thinking they'd need emergency extraction. But when the fighting stopped, they'd won. They didn't need rescuing. They never needed rescuing. But the numbers and the battles only tell part of the story, because American operators kept mentioning something else, something harder to quantify. In veteran communities and military podcasts, U.S. Special Operations personnel consistently describe a cultural difference in how Australian SAS operators approach combat. One former Green Beret put it this way: American Special Forces are trained with the best equipment, the best support infrastructure, the best funding in the world. We know we're elite, but the Australians? They fight like they have something to prove. Not to impress us, but to prove to themselves they belong in the fight. Another U.S. operator described watching an Aussie patrol walk directly into a Taliban ambush, outnumbered 3-1. And instead of taking cover and calling for air support, standard doctrine, they assaulted through the ambush. They charged the enemy positions with such aggression that the Taliban broke contact and retreated. When asked why they didn't wait for backup, the Australian team leader reportedly looked confused and said, "Mate, we are the backup. This isn't bravado. This is organizational culture forged through one of the most brutal selection processes in the world." The SASR selection course has failure rates between 80 and 95%. Let that sink in. Up to 95 out of every 100 candidates fail. And these aren't civilians off the street. These are already elite soldiers, Australian commandos, paratroopers, infantry, who've proven themselves in combat. They're already among the best in the Australian Defence Force. And 95% of them don't make it through SASR selection. The course runs approximately 3 weeks. Candidates face sleep deprivation, food restriction, psychological stress testing, and physical challenges designed to break them mentally before physically. One U.S. Navy SEAL who participated in an exchange program said, "I've completed BUD/S. I've been through Hell Week." The Aussie selection broke people differently. It wasn't just pain tolerance. They dissect your decision-making under stress in ways we don't. It's psychological warfare against yourself. So why does any of this matter in 2026? Why should you care about what happened in the mountains of Afghanistan 15 years ago? Because right now, the geopolitical reality of the Indo-Pacific region is more volatile than at any time since World War II. China's naval expansion continues in the South China Sea. North Korea's nuclear program advances. Russia maintains aggressive posturing. And Australia sits at the strategic center of the world's most contested waters. In September 2021, the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia announced AUKUS, a historic security partnership. By 2025, key treaties were signed, including the Geelong Agreement, establishing a 50-year defense technology sharing arrangement. AUKUS isn't just about nuclear submarines, though that's what makes headlines. It's about recognizing that in a Pacific conflict scenario, Australian Special Operations Forces would be leading joint operations, not supporting, not assisting, leading. Think about what that means. Pentagon strategic planning now positions SASR operators as first response units in the Indo-Pacific theater. When classified briefings discuss rapid response scenarios in this region, Australian Special Forces aren't backup plans. They're primary options. A retired senior U.S. military official stated in background discussions, "In the Pacific, geography matters. Australia's proximity, their operational experience, their seamless integration with our systems. They're not just allies. In this theater, there are equals. And in some scenarios involving regional terrain and cultural navigation, they might be better positioned than we are." The United States spends over $800 billion annually on defense. Australia spends approximately $32 billion. And yet, American military planners trust Australian Special Forces at the exact same operational level as U.S. Tier 1 units. That's not charity. That's earned respect. But beyond strategy, beyond statistics, beyond geopolitics, there are moments that define why this brotherhood matters. 2012, Kandahar Province. A U.S. Marine Rifle platoon conducting a patrol came under sustained Taliban fire from fortified positions. They were pinned down in an irrigation ditch. Casualties mounting. Close air support was 20 minutes out. At their current casualty rate, they wouldn't last that long. An Australian SAS patrol operating 15 kilometers away picked up the distress call. Their mission had zero connection to that Marine unit, but the patrol commander made a decision. They diverted immediately. They covered 15 kilometers through hostile territory in 8 minutes. 8 driving speeds that should have gotten them ambushed and killed. And when they arrived at that irrigation ditch, they didn't set up a defensive perimeter. They didn't wait for the rest of the quick reaction force. They assaulted. 6 SASR operators conducted a direct assault on fortified Taliban positions that had an entire Marine platoon suppressed. And they broke the enemy position so decisively that the Marines could extract their wounded and reposition. After the firefight, the Marine platoon commander asked the Australian team leader why they risked their lives for a unit they'd never met. The SASR operator looked at him and said, "You're wearing the same flag on your shoulder that we are, mate. That makes you family. We don't leave family behind." 12 Marines returned home because 6 Australians made that call. 12 families got their sons back. That's not strategy. That's brotherhood. Now, I need to address something critically important, because this story has another chapter. And if we're going to honor the truth, we have to confront all of it, including the darkest parts. In November 2020, the Australian Defence Force released the Brotherhood Report, a 4-year investigation into alleged war crimes committed by some SASR personnel in Afghanistan between 2005 and 2016. The findings were devastating. The report identified credible evidence that 25 current or former SASR members were involved in the unlawful killing of 39 Afghan civilians and prisoners. These weren't accidents. These weren't collateral damage. These were alleged murders. Australia didn't cover it up. They didn't make excuses. They launched criminal investigations. They stripped medals. They dismissed personnel. They implemented comprehensive cultural reforms within the SASR. And as of 2026, prosecutions and investigations continue. A former U.S. Delta Force operator commented on the controversy. "War exposes the best and worst of humanity. What matters isn't whether darkness appears. It will. What matters is accountability." Australia held their people accountable publicly. They didn't hide behind classification. They investigated, they prosecuted, and they're rebuilding their culture. That takes courage. This doesn't erase the extraordinary service of thousands of SASR operators who conducted themselves with honor. but also doesn't excuse the criminal actions of those who violated the laws of war and the values they swore to uphold. Both truths exist. Both matter. So what's the final answer? What did U.S. Navy SEALs and other American Special Forces operators actually reveal about the Australian SAS? They revealed that elite warfare isn't determined by the size of your defense budget. It's not about who has the most advanced technology or the largest military. It's not even about firepower. It's about culture, selection, training. It's about forging warriors who don't just execute orders. They become the mission itself, who don't wait for perfect conditions. They create advantage through aggression and precision. In veteran podcasts and military surveys conducted over the past few years, U.S. Special Operations personnel were asked, if you could choose only one foreign unit to have your back in the worst fight of your life, who would it be? Overwhelmingly, the answer was the Australian SAS. Not because they're perfect, not because their history is without stain, but because when rounds are flying, when the odds are impossible, when everything is falling apart, they don't break. They don't quit. They just fight. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Elite doesn't mean flawless. It means tested, accountable, resilient, willing to confront failure and rebuild stronger. That's what the SASR has proven, not just in combat, but how they've faced their darkest chapter with transparency and reform. That's what U.S. Navy SEALs and American Special Operations Forces revealed. Not that Australians are superhuman, but that there's something perhaps more important in the long run. They're professional, they're accountable, and they're absolutely, undeniably elite. If this video changed how you understand Australia's military legacy, both the triumphs and the failures, hit that like button. Subscribe to ANZAC War Tales for more stories that go beyond the headlines. And drop a comment. What military story should I investigate next? Thanks for watching. And remember, true respect is earned in the shadows, but maintained in the light.